Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for an SME Fireside Chat with Shireen Hafeez today. I'm Tony Neary. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Workforce Innovation here at SME, and I'm so excited for this conversation to take a deeper dive. If you did miss our Manufacturing Day webinar, we'll share the link in the chat where you can catch that after the fact. But today we're taking a deeper dive with Shireen, and she's the founder of Deaf Kids Code, an initiative that's dedicated to empowering deaf and hard of hearing children through technology. Her passion for inclusivity in tech stems from her experience, is really just absolutely groundbreaking. And today we're going to talk a little bit about her journey, the transformation, the power of the programs, and a little bit more about what drove you to be this just amazing juggernaut that's doing so many things for the deaf and hearing impaired community. Sheree, tell me a little bit about your background, because this was kind of my first question. Like, how did you end up here? Were you a teacher? Like, what did you do and how did you end up in the capacity of starting this program?
It is a rather wild story, as life, is for many of us. The human experience is, you have these big plans in your life, and then, you end up doing something that you never even dreamt of. I'll say first off that it was never a dream or aspiration of mine to ever be a founder or of any kind. Like it just was not like in my life's plan. My background is not education and it is not technology. And this is actually like a good story in many ways for other people that think about, doing something in another sector and thinking of themselves as an outsider. But I'm the first one to say that anybody can shift their path. And as long as you keep putting time and energy into something, you eventually become a subject matter expert in something that you may have not had experience with. So, the catalyst for me starting the organization was that I'm the mother of a son that was born with severe hearing loss. I was actually in graduate school studying international political economy. My undergraduate degree was in political science. So, not at all, not entirely related to anything that I do now. But I will say that it was useful in the sense that when in the first couple of years of my son's diagnosis, I led a lobbying effort for hearing aids, for an insurance mandate to cover hearing aids in the state, to cover children 19 years and younger. And that is something that I never imagined I'd be doing ever. But when I found out that insurance companies could decline children that would benefit from the technology, they could reject you and simply say that it's considered a cosmetic device. And where, which is, even though the World Health Organization, every Department of Health across the United States claims that hearing loss is in fact a medical condition, and there is mountains and mountains of global studies that show the benefits of assisted listening devices, especially in the impact of development for children. But regardless of all of that, they can say no, that it's considered a cosmetic device. So at that time when I led it, less than half the states in the US had such any kind of coverage for children. So that was like, that happened. And then, soon after that, I started Deaf Kids Code because the irony of that actually is that I somehow really truly believed that somebody somewhere, somebody from Google or somebody from somewhere would surely see the logic in an initiative like Deaf Kids Code, because the world had made such rapid inroads and had escalated in ways of equalizing opportunity and participation in this world, that it just seems so logical from a workforce
Right.
development perspective. And for 4 years, I sat on this thinking that surely somebody would start something like this. And it was only until my son hit puberty that I really went into panic mode. Now, the good thing about that is that when I started this in 2015, actually, there were many ed tech startups that had just gone into the market, which basically were intended to democratize access to computer science education. And it was through experimenting with many, many, many different types of curriculum and things that were out there that emboldened me, that it's like, yeah. And of course, I had my child as my number one guinea pig, that it's like, okay, well, if he can get this, then surely other kids and educators can see the value in this in terms of its computational thinking aspects and deductive reasoning and problem solving and logic and all of these things that our current standard of measurement, uh, from the mainstream aspect fails to recognize. But I would take it even further, that rather your kid has a disability or not, the way we measure ability is very one dimensional and very, very narrow. And there is a national conversation that's challenging all of this and saying, well, what is the point of any of this? Like, what is it that we're actually trying to measure? And that's what's so beautiful about these kinds of conversations, especially in the ecosystem that SME is a part of, which is that, well, why are we not looking at certifications? Why are we not looking at alternative skill sets that are not dependent on post-secondary institutions? Like, why are we not
Right.
looking at, because the goal is that everybody has the ability to contribute to society. Full stop.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because one of the things when we as SME talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, we are also talking about individuals with disabilities, which I like to say unique abilities. From my time, I sit on the board of Uniquely Abled Project of when we look at the deficits that an individual have, are those truly barriers to entry? Probably not. So when you look at what that opportunity opens for individuals like your son, but the entire community that maybe doesn't have a mom who knows how to block and tackle and lobby and get all of these things done, you're creating so much opportunity. But more importantly, this is a win-win-win because you're creating an opportunity for an individual to learn new skills. You're creating a marketable employee that companies want to have, but you're also providing this opportunity for a community for somebody who may be stuck on disability when they want to go to work and they want to give back and they want to have a career.
100%. And I actually have a beautiful story of a pilot program that we facilitated with CompTIA for A+ certifications and NTID, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. That pilot program took 12, I mean, my numbers may not be exact. This is all publicly available information, but it was something like 12 unemployed adults from around the country. This was an NSF funded pilot program, and flew in all of these individuals to NTID for what would be considered a boot camp. And they were taught by a deaf facilitator who was A+ certified themselves, and, you know, put them through the whole gamut. And, uh, you know, the results were incredible because I believe it was like 95% of them passed the A+ certification, and 4, I believe, ended up wanting to continue their education and add on more certifications and qualifications. And a portion of them went directly into industry. And I think that that is really the pulse check, that
Right.
what it means, that when we're talking about investment, when we're talking about workforce development training, it boggles my mind that why workforce development dollars are not put into these type of training and certification programs that would require a minimum percentage of people with disabilities. Like, it boggles my mind that why that is not compulsory, because if you think about what an enormous portion of high potential individuals, and we're not even just talking about death. Like, we can talk about so many spectrums of what would be considered that fall under the vast ocean of what qualifies as disability,
Right.
that are not being invested in, that could very well be contributing to the economy, that are instead on disability or social security.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we see is that there's the unemployment rate, and then you look at unemployment rates of individuals on disability, and the numbers skyrocket on the potential workforce that's kind of willing and able and actively looking for an opportunity. So let's talk about, I love this phrase, the universal language of computing. And I have to tell a story. So my son was probably 4 or 5 years old, and he said, "Ma, have you ever gone somewhere and somebody doesn't speak the same language as you?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "What if we all spoke sign language? What if we could all learn sign language and everybody could just communicate?" And it was such a young, little idealistic child's mindset. But then, my daughter is going into high school. She's like, "I want my secondary language to be American Sign Language. I want to be able to sign. I think this is a really great skill. Could you imagine being able to help people communicate?" And so talk with me a little bit about this universal language of computing, because that's exactly where my head went when I thought of that.
Well, you touched on two things, American Sign Language, and then we're talking about the universal, you know, elements of technology, right? Like, we define computer science as the way humans communicate with technology. We have a very simple, definition for that. But it is absolutely true that technology is a universal language. I mean, if you are working on robotics in this country, you can work in robotics in Switzerland and Tijuana and Vietnam. Like, it doesn't change. And that's what's so powerful and so potent about acquiring these skill sets, is because it is universal. And when we talk about sign language, well, I mean, you know, there's so many instances that rather you're deaf or not, in ways that this could benefit. Imagine in a loud manufacturing environment where you can barely hear, you have sound, buffering headphones on, and you are auditorily challenged in communicating with your team. Imagine if you could just sign it.
Hmm.
Imagine if you are far away from another person or even your own family member, and it's just too doggone loud to communicate and scream on top of your lungs, and say that you have low, phone signal. You can sign to them. I
Right?
think
I mean,
baseball players already have their own like
right?
version,
Football
but
players
I
do
mean,
too. Volleyball coach, I'd watch my daughter's, coach showing her where to hit the ball on a serve. But if we can take that and we can use it to be more effective communication, how compelling is that?
well, it's the same argument as we had for wheelchair ramps. Now we know that for delivery people and for people with disabilities and wheelchairs, aside from that, there have been so many beneficiaries of having ramps that go beyond the disabled. And that's only one example. Even captioning is such a valuable thing. I mean, if you're watching a movie where people are talking in very heavy accents, I'm sure that many of you turn the captions on because it's like, I don't understand their Scottish accent. It's too thick, though they're speaking English, and you're rereading it. I mean, there's just so many benefits to, I mean, the motto is that when you build for disability, you actually end up creating a better user experience for everyone.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about how educational institutions and the tech industry could really collaborate to enhance this career pathways. And again, not just for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Like you said, you're paving the way for more individuals to find this as a career option. Talk a little bit about, in a perfect world, your queen for the day. What would educational institutions in the tech industry be doing right now to work together more?
You mean working in collaboration with
Mhm.
education institutions? Oh,
Yes.
it would look nothing like we see it now. It would look vastly different. I mean, our kids would be working on prototypes. They would be building apps for the community that are in need. Like they would be acquiring real world skills that are applicable to real world society. Like it would be taking the abstraction into real world implementation. I think that the biggest problem is that things are just so theoretical that our kids are graduating with zero employable skills. And I'm sure that for all the industries that are going to listen in on this, I mean, they'll be like, yeah, like this is a big problem. It's a
Right.
huge problem. Like, show up on time and make eye contact when we're communicating and things like that. It's just, we're not building a generation in a way that they could optimize their potential and their contribution to the world. And this is disability or no disability. My
Right.
motto is that there's no greater disability than a person believing that they can't.
Oh, I absolutely love that because I think that's part of it, right? Is having a support system and somebody that says, this is what you can do, this is what you're capable of, versus you can't do that or you won't be able to do that. So, what advice would you offer to other parents of children like your son who want to support their child's interest in technology but really don't know where to start?
Well, I would say that community colleges are a very highly untapped resource in many communities that unfortunately it's not emphasized enough that the kind of certification courses and things that exist and the relationship that industry partners have with those certification ecosystems. I mean, of course there are like training facilities and places where you can get, there are boot camps and things like that, but again you have to be very careful with where you're planning on making an investment, because there are predatory programs that actually do not render results and could leave you in high levels of debt. And those at risk communities are at greater risk for falling prey into a for profit pathway with absolutely no recourse in like what the outcome is. And this is something that is being talked about a lot now because there's an uproar of people in debt with no marketable skills and nowhere to
Right.
put these so-called certifications. So I feel like the ecosystem in every state needs to be tighter, number one, because every state has its own demands for skill sets. I mean, if you live in a heavy automotive industry community, for example, then there needs to be a tighter ecosystem that is more clear and less abstract in we're hiring people from this college. If you get these sort of like, I think the ecosystem should be more black and white. It's so abstract and it's so gray because we know technology is not one language or one skill. There's a big difference between learning, Raspberry Pi and SQL or R or, Python. And now, we're getting involved with machine learning and AI and the relationships within those and what certifications are going to optimize your skill set from a marketable point of view. So this is something that I think on a national level, the conversations are going on and it's been going on. But from my perspective, I still don't see anything that is like clear. And I think that this is something that really needs to be amplified better in communities, because it's not a one size fits all. If you live in, Cleveland, Ohio, I'm sure that I mean, we know that cybersecurity, that we
Hmm.
know that there are hundreds of thousands of vacancies that exist. Like, we know that, right? I mean, and so I feel like, but of course, that's a very specialized skill set. And the skill set can be even more hyper specialized based on the sector you're in.
Right.
So I feel like that kids should be able to graduate high school with a certain foundational level of skill set, so that when they are moving on to like a more robust program to really sharpen their blades, what is the next step? And I feel like that ecosystem is not as clear as it should be on a national level.
And I think it gets confusing with the number of programs that are out there too, right? Is looking at like
Yeah.
what opportunities look like. I have to give a shout out to one of our partner associations that we do work with, and that's FMA, the Fabricators and Manufacturers Association. They have a long-standing summer camp program called Nuts, Bolts, and Thingamajigs, and they've started new inclusive programming that is specifically for individuals with disabilities, just so that there's something that's more unique for them and they can kind of cater. So that's also another opportunity if you want to see maybe a career in manufacturing might be for my student or my child. That could be a good option for you as well. Let's talk a little bit about what your program looks like. So, are students taking this during the standard school day? Is it an after school program? Are there summer camps? How can somebody consume content for Deaf Kids Code?
There's so many things, especially after, well, since like COVID, we have amplified what we do in a multitude of ways. So before COVID, we used to do hands-on interactive learning experiences in real time in a classroom. And then when COVID struck, we realized that how like desperately under-resourced, and the lack of enrichment program and opportunities that existed. And no two schools were the same. Some were in person, and a lot remained virtual. And so we, had mailed thousands of STEM kits around the country, and would provide live virtual, lessons with like, well, think of it as a live virtual interactive makerspace experience, where students would have glue guns, and they would have, mini motors and things like that, and they would build and create something. That was crazy. Um, and completely overwhelming. My basement turned into a mini factory. It was
I can't
nuts.
even imagine.
Luckily, I have a very supportive family, but um, but of course, I mean, we have provided, virtual programming, where we've had like industry partners with a very focused program. We've partnered with NASA, we've partnered with, UiPath, we've partnered with, I mean, there's just so many incredible, partners that we've been able to bring opportunities like Teen and Tech Days, where students get to go in to an actual real world environment, rather it's industrial or, corporate, and they would get an immersive day of, what is a day in the life of these people, and what are the different job titles, what are the different skill sets they're looking for. And we would have the company lead that with their team. And the beautiful thing about those immersive days is that it was a twofold benefit. One side would be that now a company actually can say that yes, we have had experience working with this particular group of individuals, and we see that how we can, be better allies, or that it actually wasn't a big deal and it was great. Like, I don't know why we're so fearful of hiring people with disabilities. Like, that really was amazing. And on the other side, our students get to feel included, that the fear and the anxiety of what's going to happen when we're in these type of environments, um, what is it going to be like? And so the anxiety and the fear and the presumptions that would exist then dissolve. And that is something that I highly encourage, like anybody that's on this, webinar listening in, to go to your ERGs and ask that, hey, like, can we do, a day in manufacturing or something like that? And let's do it. Like, connect with us and we'll see that, how we can arrange something. These are meaningful, life altering experiences. For a lot of companies, it's nothing for them. But for our community, it can be life altering.
And I think about that, the cultural change and the shift that we're seeing as we talk about more inclusivity and more inclusive hiring practices. I know I was talking with an individual at FANUC, Joe, and I said, "Oh yeah, we might want to film this and film that." And we were talking about a project to help create awareness about careers in manufacturing. And he said, "Oh, he said we have an engineer on our team who is deaf, so he signs everything. And the best thing that happened to him was COVID." Because he could actually be in meetings and be able to translate and capture information real time with technology that he couldn't use on the shop floor because you're having that real time conversation. And I was like, oh, I guess I never really thought about the fact that technology could be such an equalizer. So again, it's like, my brain is spinning of all of these different opportunities that you're creating that we almost have the blinders on, right? We don't know what we don't know. So when you're not looking at, wow, and this brings a totally different perspective because this person has lived a totally different life than anybody else we have on their team. I can't imagine how different their thoughts, feedback, brainstorming, strategic thinking, everything is just so different because of the fact they've lived in a completely altered world than what we've lived in.
Well, and there is data. The good thing is that there's a lot of data that shows that people with disabilities have very high productivity rates, that can meet or exceed standard. So it's not like that there's, a benevolence about it. Like, you are a direct beneficiary of that productivity. So we know that, the corporations don't ride on altruism. We know that it's all about meeting your standards and your deadlines and your bottom line and blah blah blah, but there is a very strong case to be made in terms of productivity and just overall positive, morale in hiring, people from diverse backgrounds. I mean, there's just mountains of data that support that argument, as long as the the employer has a good culture.
Precisely. And that's what I was going to say is I know from the Uniquely Able project work that I've done and working here, I work with Lake County Board of Developmental Disability in Ohio, is that they will have job coaches that will actually come to work with individuals for the first couple of days for their training and onboarding. And that's part of the process. And one of the companies said, no, we can't have anybody coming through that is not on our payroll because of NDAs and all this other stuff. And they were like, well, then we're not sending somebody to you because we don't send anybody into a situation that a job coach is not side by side. And I think they do it for the first week, but it can be longer if needed to make sure that our individuals are not just understanding the job roles and responsibilities, but making sure that your culture is one that is accepting and a good place for our people to be as well, which I think is, the other important part of the conversation is, making sure that your culture this cannot be an HR decision. This cannot be a president of the company decision. This needs to be a corporate culture to actually work with individuals with disabilities and make sure that you understand challenges that may arise, but also the benefit that these individuals can bring to your company.
100%. I mean, I offer trainings all the time, of, how to be a better presenter, virtually or even in person, especially if you're working with, the thing is that everybody has a different processing rate with how they process information, disability or no disability. Like, everybody processes information at different rates. And when you incorporate universal design principles when you are presenting to an audience, disability or not, you're going to have a better absorption of information and what's being told and expressed in that process. And that can be very difficult for some people. For some people, they're like, yes, I'm going to keep practicing this approach and I'm going to do it this way and that, you know. But for some people, they just either lack the will or they just would rather not. And that it's all performative at the end, that it's like we're just, pretending to be, I mean, look at the illiteracy rate in this country. I mean, over, 50 million adults don't read past a sixth grade level.
Hmm.
So if you're talking about greater incorporation into, workplace and certification programs, even the language you use has to be modified. It has to be accessible language. And it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. Not everybody grew up in an intellectual family. Not everybody has that vocabulary, but that doesn't mean that you can't rephrase something in a simpler way for people to understand. Like, you should have the ability to define terms in easy ways, and because once you know what you know, there's no going back. And
Right.
I think this is an important aspect of when we are putting effort into training individuals, is that the goal is to master the concepts. How does it matter how you get there? And the
Right.
problem is that the people that build the curriculum are usually very high level in as subject matter experts, that they don't have that sensitivity to realize that, okay, I'm building this curriculum for people with the assumption that everybody's at my level. And that's where so much training and curriculum falter and render negative results, or you have people that end up being weeded out. And once again, you have high potential individuals that are being weeded out of programs when all you had to do was talk in simpler terms.
Right. And I think that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is how do you ensure that your curriculum is not just accessible, but also engaging for your students?
Oh, yeah. So we go through a lot of curriculum. We are constantly ripping and shredding things that are out in the market, left, right, and center. A lot of it is not well done. And I would suggest to anybody out there who is listening that if you're creating curriculum or you're, looking to embed curriculum, is you really need to test it out, and test it out with like the baseline, like, the lower hanging fruit from your population that you're planning to serve. And that is going to be your test and your pilot, that is this going to work or not? Because a lot of it, unfortunately, is for all the reasons I cited before. So, yeah, so we vet through a lot. Unfortunately, we have to create our own curriculum. Like, we can take, of course, we are very, very specific about using as much open source as we can, because we don't want for schools to embed this curriculum. We don't want it to be another barrier to access if it's not open source. We don't
Right.
want them struggling for grant funding and this and that. And, the monetization of, a friend of mine, her mom is like a 93-year-old, had published many books. And I visited her in the nursing home the other day, and she said that, knowledge should never be sold. And I said, I couldn't agree with you more. But
Right.
I think that this is a big problem, but that's another TED Talk for another day. But in terms of curriculum, yes, we vet through a lot, but we also do things in a backward and deconstruction approach. So for example, we will have our kids build things with circuits, for example, or we'll have them follow like lines of code, and then we will show them like, okay, this is what the code, like, this is what the output is, either on a robot or in a 3D printer, or on the web, in all these different vehicles we'll show them. And then we'll have them manipulate the code. Now, what happens if you do this? What happens if you do that? Now, what happens if we add this? What happens if we add that? So we care less that if our students know the word algorithm. What matters to us is that they were able to build a command sequence on their own. They were able to manipulate it. They were able to shred it. They were able to build something new from it. So so a lot of what we do is very experimental. We encourage experimentation because we're not grading anybody. Nobody is being judged on the outcome. Like we want them to test and we want them to learn fast what doesn't work. We want them to catch their own errors so that they know how to pivot. Those are like incredible skills because that's resilience. That's how you gain grit. And that is ultimately, how a student develops agency and the hunger to learn more because they believe in themselves. That's how you plant the belief system. So when you were talking about, well, in a dream world, what would education look like? It wouldn't look any, the whole system would be dismantled entirely.
And I think one of my favorite sayings I've recently heard is failure is first attempt in learning. That's what fail stands for. And so we need to teach students that failing is an option. It's a good option and it's called an iteration. You need to fail in order to sometimes succeed. So I heard the term failing upward and I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. Like you're failing, but you're learning more and you're moving and moving.
Yeah.
So I love that philosophy and I think it's so important. What type of feedback are you taking from students that are participating and families that are in your program when you're looking forward at additional development and future development?
Well, it's always a great day when we get an email saying that, when can you come back? Or what can I do at home? Or, can you send me, the resources for these things that you utilized? Um, those are really wonderful things. I'll also say that I think I didn't answer that in your previous question was where do we do our programming? So majority of our program is done during school hours,
Okay.
the vast majority, because so for example, there is a school in Atlanta that serves kids that are deaf in over 26 counties.
Wow.
26. So these are kids that are on the bus for 3 hours coming to school in the morning and
Wow.
going home. It's unbelievable. So, so so doing things during school hours optimizes our access to the most amount of students. If we try to do things after school, then kids miss their rides home
Hmm.
and who knows where their home is. So there are so many variables. Although we do summer programming and we have done some after school programming, like we have an ongoing programming with the Chicago Park District Deaf Hard of Hearing program, which serves as a nest for about nine um, Chicago public schools. So these kids come from all over for these programs, and our program is one of the staples there, and it's beautiful, like it's incredible, right? I mean, those are usually hosted on Saturdays. Just last summer, we did a full week program at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf in Philadelphia. Um, so it just depends. Like, we have learned from very early on that we have to be a very flexible organization. We have to meet students at where they're at. We have to meet educators with what accommodates them. One of our values is zero barrier to access. So that means a multitude of things. We don't charge for our programming because we don't want to add to the burden of schools that, oh, we have to find funding if we want to bring a deaf kids code. So these more upscale CS, computer science technology camps that are like almost $1,000 a week during summer. Imagine we do all that for free.
Wow. It's
So,
amazing.
yeah, it is amazing, and imagine that it's led by, a deaf role model. So, so even more spectacular is that you can believe what you see, and you're having this immersive experience, and you are worth it.
And I think it's really important when we look at especially young learners, providing them an opportunity where they see people that are like them. Because, it's what I always say to my kids. If you walk in a room and you're the only one who looks like you, what's the first thing you think? Do I belong here? So having those role models, and I think that opens us up on how can we encourage more deaf and hard of hearing individuals and young people to really pursue careers in technology and STEM fields? What are some of the actionable items that we can do?
Well, there are many things that can be done. I think that number one, really look into your own ecosystem. That what is it that we have? What is it that we don't have? How has our outreach been? What if we were to dedicate X amount of seats of an apprenticeship to a student with disabilities? Like it's all like about being intentional, right? Because if you rely on society as a whole to create those seats at the table, it is never going to happen.
Mhm.
Trust me, I have been doing this since 2015. Less than 2% of philanthropic dollars go to organizations like ours. But data shows that you have $25 billion sitting on the table, um, that could have been put towards, contribution to society if you had more disabled people participating in the workforce.
Right.
I mean, so there is a blockade that I have yet to figure out myself. That what is the hesitation? What is it that holds you back, that you have this knee-jerk resistance to wanting to create an experiment, with a pilot program or something. Like, I mean, we did a pilot program with P&G 2 summers ago, and it was a 10-week paid internship program for high schoolers. And these were kids that were not headed on a traditional post-secondary pathway. And it was incredible, like what the outcomes were. I mean, at the end of the 10 weeks, one of our students who had been in and out of foster care her whole life, imagine death, foster care,
Wow.
incarcerated parent, low socioeconomic, educationally deprived. I mean, imagine that. And she stood on the stage in the corporate, office, and pitched to the whole community about what would make their company more accessible. And guess what?
Wow.
They actually paid heed to those suggestions. So you have a kid that had like no hope, no trajectory, no nothing. And then she became like this dragon and saying, here's here. And it was a very systematic, very technical, very sharp presentation. And it was brilliant. So the thing is that these moments of magic and the potential of you being witness to these things are all around you. You just have to have the willingness to partner with an organization like mine. Like we're in it together, but don't you want to be the beneficiary of that talent?
Right.
That's the part that boggles me the most, is that why wouldn't you want to see what other people are made of? Like, aren't you tired of the same kinds of teams that you have put together? And it's the same old, and there's a lack of creativity and innovative ideas. It's because your teams aren't diverse. Everybody's coming from the
Absolutely.
same lived experiences.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really good time for us to talk a little bit about community partnerships and how they really can play a role in enhancing the reach and effectiveness of your programs. Because we may have people out there now saying, well, I would love to get involved in this, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's like if your company is in need of employees of a certain skill set, then you should be looking at, well, who are the training partners? Where do we retrieve our talent from? Where do we recruit? And that's where the layers can be peeled upon, right? Because again, like there are so many transition programs around the country. Almost every state has, these transition vocational rehabilitation programs. And you can also look into veterans with
Mhm.
disabilities. I mean, it's not even just like we're talking 18-year-olds, like you're talking about historically unemployed individuals that have the ability to be upskilled, retrained, and embedded into your systems. And when we talk about recruiting, I say that the reason you're having a problem with recruiting is because you're looking where everybody else is looking. And you need to look where other people are not looking. That's how it's that there needs to be more creativity in how you're exploring, what is the cultivation of talent, and what is it that we're imagining as a company? Like, how are we looking to grow? How are we looking to scale? How are we looking to innovate? Well, you need to have diversity within your team. Those lived experiences are like extraordinary, and you never know where that eureka moment will come from, from the individuals that you least expect it. But again, this goes back to culture. That do you have the kind of culture that welcomes, that type of feedback? Or, is it a very structured, hierarchical, toxic environment where everybody
Right.
keeps quiet? You really have to examine those things, because that requires soul searching, that requires honesty, and that requires perhaps drastic change in leadership. But again, it's like, to really be some of the best companies in the world, you have to have courage.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things where, again, you're tapping into the same talent pool that everybody else is. So the other thing is, I know a lot of community and technical colleges are struggling with enrollment numbers right now. And if you're an employer or, you're somebody who's doing hiring, ask your community and technical colleges what they're doing to attract individuals with disabilities. What are they doing for that audience? What are they doing to grow the talent pool? What are they doing for, separated service members? And I think you can ask those questions and make sure they have a compelling answer, because a lot of times they don't know what they don't know. They don't know where to go. And there's so many like great community-based organizations that are working with justice impacted individuals, homeless, people coming out of drug rehab programs, veterans, individuals with disabilities that are actively looking for an upward trajectory and will probably be some of the most loyal people you will ever hire in your company.
100%. And I just wish that when these fundings and grants and industry partners are writing these giant checks, like, there should be strings attached. There should be strings attached, and because it's up to you to decide. I mean, aren't you frustrated with the same pool of, constituents coming your way? Like there should be strings attached, and there should be greater pressure, because institutions are not flexible. They're very slow to change. And I think that, that it really has to be a top-down process. That
Mhm.
if you are an industry partner and you have all these people with Cisco certifications, like, maybe you need to be asking and putting a little more pressure on the neck of these institutions that, okay, but I want X amount allocated to fund X amount of students that come from disabled communities.
And there's a lot of state dollars right now, as well as federal dollars, going to grow diversity of individuals with disabilities at community and technical colleges. Can we hand deliver Deaf Kids Code to them and say, this is an
Yeah.
opportunity that you can host a summer camp, help your
Yeah.
local high school with doing in-school programming, and
Right.
let that community and technical college kind of lead the way. Let's talk a little bit about if there's individuals or companies out there today that are hearing this message for the first time and saying, I want to support what you are doing with Deaf Kids Code. How can people engage with your organization?
Well, they can send me an email, which you're welcome to share in the chat if you'd like. And I'm on LinkedIn, and just reach out to us and let's have a conversation. Tell me where in the country you are, and we can look at geographical areas, and we can partner. If you want to help fund a summer camp in your region, we're happy to do that. Like, so, and have your employees volunteer, if you want to host a day of manufacturing, like, again, like, you build it and we'll come, and we're happy to help you build it too. We want you to succeed. We want it to be a beautiful experience for everybody involved. But nothing happens alone, and we can't keep doing everything in isolation. Like, we all need each other, and we all have to, be in it together.
Absolutely. And I think even mentorship, if you know somebody that's hearing impaired, or you have somebody that you work with that you think, oh my gosh, I just heard about this program and I think you should get engaged, that's another way to connect and share that experience for somebody to be a mentor, be a coach, and help tell their story as well.
That would be a dream. So if that exists, then shout out to Tony and listen to her advice, because yeah, we do have that too. And that is always beautiful. And sometimes you're right. And a lot of times I've had people come up to me after talks and will be like, "Oh my gosh, like, we have two people in our company, like, I'm going to connect them." And it's so beautiful, because of course those people, and individuals, they don't want to be the only two out of 10,000 employees. Like, there should be more of them, right? But
Right.
how do you have more of them, that we all have to be in it together to raise a village?
Absolutely. And then also financial contributions. Obviously, you're trying to make this low or no cost for people to participate. So
Right.
if you're a company and you're looking to support diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and maybe your culture isn't there yet, cut a check, send it over, and help support getting this program in more places as well. Because, I mean, it's a rising tide rises all ships, and hopefully we get to a point that we need a bigger boat.
Amen to that. Yeah, it is really tough. I mean, you can imagine the personal sacrifices, that have been made as a way to ensure that this programming continues to exist, and that we can keep the model that we have. And you're not going to see a more altruistic organization than ours. Like, your money isn't going to a CEO's salary. It's
Mhm.
going, and our facilitators who are deaf also receive a stipend. So your money is going to pay for a deaf person's employment, and it's going back to impact the community and provide a learning experience that otherwise would not exist for this community. So that's important to acknowledge, is that, and this is where it is not, a great thing to be a big fish in a very small pond. Believe me, we would love to have other organizations to compete with us, but there is none, and we are it. And so all of it matters. And so allyship, mentorship, hosting a day of shadowing, all of it, like, whatever is within your bandwidth, you know, please, reach out to us.
Absolutely. And then before we turn it over and open it up for questions, if anybody has them with our audience, what's your final message that you really want to share out regarding the importance of inclusivity in technology and education?
I think that it is a greater philosophical question for all of us, is that disability should not be a knee-jerk reaction to sympathy, that disability should be looked at as high potential, and that we have to change our mindset with how we view what is disability. I mean, I have seen children that are blind and low vision take apart computers and put them back together with very little um, coaching or support needed. Like, we're talking incredible things. I have been so lucky to have witnessed so many moments of greatness, and it is the greatest tragedy when, when students are not given the opportunity to transition into the real world that there's just nothing for them. And that is just the greatest tragedy of our time, because unlike previous generations that existed before, that you can understand, oh, well, there were barriers, so they had to just do this, or they had to live in an institution. Imagine my own son. If this had happened 35 years ago, he would
Right.
be in an asylum, you know. And this is a kid that is studying, applied physics and doing his own research in quantum computing, building algorithms for, I mean, it's crazy.
It's
So someday,
absolutely amazing.
it's
It really
crazy.
is. Yeah.
Right,
And
but
the
he's
world
not
is
the only
changing.
one. Yeah, and he's not the only one. He's not the only one. Like, he is one of many, 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 many. So why would we not want to invest in that? He shouldn't be the only one, and he's not. But there should be more. And so that's the takeaway, is to expand, your belief system in how you think about disability. And you have to remember that every human being in the course of their life will experience some type of disability, small or large. That it is the
Absolutely.
one community that we will all belong to at some point throughout our lives. Some of us are a breath away, and some are, years down the road, or maybe we had a disability that we somehow, rehabbed and bounced back from, or who knows what. But that's what is, it doesn't separate us from them. We are them and they are us.
Absolutely. And Shireen, I cannot thank you enough, not just for sharing your journey and the incredible work that you're doing, but your passion, and the fact that this goes above and beyond just your own son, and that you've created this amazing company that is going to change the world for kids and the community and the workforce. Your commitment to empowering deaf and hard of hearing youth through technology is truly remarkable. It's clear your efforts are making a significant impact in the community, and we look forward to seeing how you continue to grow, and transform lives. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, thank you for joining us today. It's such a joy. It's a joy to really show that the world is changing and we are hoping to be a tiny part of it. So we do hope that you complete the program survey for joining us today. The link is in the chat. And we do have 2 more fireside chats. These came from our Manufacturing Day presentation. So we'll be talking with Shanali and Kara. Those will be coming up in October, later October and November. And we just thank you for being a part of the conversation, as we really do look to change the way that the manufacturing world looks. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.